was the best time to build is yesterday, but if you have the luxury of waiting, right, then it's not clear how sort of the intersection of the advancements and the tools and the frameworks versus creating where the value is accrued.
All right, Collective Nation, we have a very special guest, Henry. So Henry, let's just start off with your story. So you're 22 years old back in the day. You start this company, super.com, and it grows. It grows into $1 billion in sales annually. Take us back to why you decided to start a company at such a young age.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've always been doing entrepreneurship since probably high school. First exposure was through Junior Achievement, which is an amazing after school program where they get kids together after school. You start a company from scratch, incorporation, funding to building a product to selling it to winding it down all within one school year. Right. That was really my first foray into entrepreneurship and really taught me the essence of building a company. I mean, it was a gift bag basket company, but it really taught me the process. And if you think about it, that's really the essence of business. You have an idea, you talk to customers, you build something people want, and you try to grow and scale it. And you eventually have some sort of exit, IPO down the line, but just all condensed one school year. So that was my first foray. I then did some incubator accelerator programs during undergrad. I went to Waterloo, did part of the Velocity program, which is like an on-campus resident incubator program. It was great. I interned in a startup that came out of YC. So I saw that kind of experience firsthand and really just inspired my experience. Inspired my motivation and excitement to building a company. Something special about building something that wouldn't have existed, that maybe no one overlooked or thought about, and you really just get to build something, talk to customers, iterate quickly, run experiments, and just build stuff. And that was really exciting. So for me, I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. After graduating, I spent 1 year at Google. It was very smart people, great place, but it was very bureaucratic, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape, a lot of politics, and just wasn't really the place for me. It took me 8 months before I could ship anything. So I knew that I want to get back to building and shipping, quick iterating. So I quit my job exactly after 1 year and just went on this whole journey to find a founder, a co-founder, work together, iterate, test ideas, and eventually started Super.com.
So then why not go into someone else's business and sort of learn the ropes, as they say? I mean, there's always this sort of, Jeff Bezos was 30. He had worked as a PM, but then on the other side, you have Zuckerberg who, was studying classics and was kind of doing this Facebook thing on the side. Like, where do you fall on the scale of, when is it best to kind of go and work for someone else and study the ropes rather than just, sort of just get in there and do it yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. I think actually it's a great idea to work for someone or work with somebody and really get boosted early in your career. Right? And you get to build a network, you get to learn from some of the best, and you get to really be part of a great journey. Look at the PayPal mafia, right? You look at the other sort of alumni of certain startups. They've had really great outcomes. So I definitely do really recommend that. I think I just got a little bit earlier exposure through some of the programs I interned at a YC company. They had just come out of YC, pre-Series A. The founders were really experienced. I got to work very closely with them. So that was really my sort of quick, I guess, dosage of that. Now, actually, I do still recommend, like, if you don't have an idea and you don't have a co-founder and you're not sure if you want to do startup, right? I definitely do recommend spending some time working with startups and with really great founders to really get that experience, to get that exposure, get that credibility, and get that network to really amplify your impact.
Yeah, and so then let's go back to super.com. What were the sets of experiences that you were having at that time that made you sort of take that leap? Was it one day where you just realized and woke up you wanted to solve some particular problem, or was it sort of a set of experiences?
Yeah. I mean, I wish we had a romantic story to how we started our company, but really it was just execution, iterating, really the lean principle, lean startup, and just iterating really quickly on that. So when I met my co-founder, he had already sold a company and was looking to start a company again. I had some startup experience and we just got together, had common values, goals, ideas, and wanted to work together. So we got together. We were probably founder dating for about 1 or 2 quarters, testing various ideas, and we knew we just got to work together. So I quit my job. he joined me in SF, and we just hit the ground running. And we had no idea, no industry, no vertical at the time, and we just wanted to iterate and build stuff and test, talk to customers, and kind of iterate. So we spent some time in the B2B space, some time in the B2C space, and really ended up in like the chatbot space back in 2016. I mean, now we don't do anything with chatbots, but that's how where we started, right? So it's really much a process of experimentation, data driven customer discovery.
So what made you think that this is the co-founder for me? I mean, that is basically the startup killer is sort of one of the big things other than cash is, founders who break up. What sort of made you guys realize that you were the sort of a good fit? Is this a more general principle, or is it sort of, person to person, you think that it was just best fit for you at the time?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like dating, where you meet people in different avenues, right? Online, friends, referrals, network, people you met in the past, friends of friends. So really, it's every channel, every avenue. I spent about half a year while I was at Google doing founder dating, just meeting tons of different people. I think I had a notebook like this thick of different people, names, ideas, and founding teams that I chatted with. I would come home from work, get on calls from 7 to 10, just chatting with people, and it'd be very fit. Sometimes it'd be first dates and was fit, not a fit. Sometimes you get second dates, third dates, and work on a project together and hack on some stuff. And really, I think it came down to just my co-founder. He was also Waterloo, and he
Mm.
had an exit before, had good experience. We had complementary skills, but also common values, goals. We wanted to build something big. We were sort of humble in our approaches, and we were quick to iterate, and we were driven to build something. So I think we just got along really well.
Mm.
It was definitely, um, I think, meeting the right person. But I'd say that's probably the biggest part. The team is so important. Ideas change, companies change, people come and go, but really the team stick together. The founding team, especially, and that's how you are able to navigate the ups and downs of building a startup, which was going to be inevitable.
Okay, so then you're doing these. So you've got your founder partner, and you're doing these customer interviews. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. What is the key? What is the key problem that starts to surface in these conversations? Is it and what does that problem look like? Is it a few sets of customers who are really obsessed with this one core problem? Is it a bunch of customers who are just everyone's just sort of denoting this problem? Like how did that come about, and how do you sort of crystallize that into a key insight?
Yeah, so when we started in the chatbot space, we were in sort of the travel chatbot space. It was kind of like a concierge for trip planning, right? And because we were a chatbot, and I was in the early days, I was the chatbot. Like I was behind the messenger and messaging people on iMessage, etc. We got a lot of great feedback from the customers because they would be talking to the chatbot, aka me. Right, so you can get their exact feedback right away, and they were engaged with chat. What we saw was that people liked the sort of recommendations and offers we were giving, but they didn't really die for it, right? They would say
Mm.
something like, "Hey, thanks so much for the recommendation. This is great, but I booked it somewhere else because it was $10 cheaper," or "This is awesome, but I'm not really traveling right now, and I'll come back to it." Or so it was kind of always a nice to have, but it didn't feel like very strong PMF because people weren't dying for it. They weren't jumping through hoops. I mean, some people were sort of willing to buy, but there was much more pull towards, at least for our customers, just the actual transaction and purchase. And what we saw was that people really cared about saving money and not so much the
Mm.
experience. And whether it's chat or web or UI interface, whatever, they don't really care about that. They care more about sort of the aspect of being able to get really good deals and offers and save money.
How do you know
That's
that though? What were they saying to you?
Oh, they were saying things like, yeah, thanks for your recommendation. This is great, but I booked it somewhere else, on Agoda for $10 cheaper, right?
Mm.
And then I'm like, well, as a user, you're kind of like, yeah, I guess it makes sense. It's the recommendation is great, but you can buy it anywhere. So we really focused a lot more on the deals and savings and offerings for our customer,
Mm.
and less on the actual like experience in chat and whatnot. So turns out it was a good decision because chat bots back then was too early, right? And the whole messenger chatbot craze kind of fizzled out. I know it's been a comeback with ChatGPT and OpenAI and whatever, so it's kind of ironic. But back then in 2016, it was a hype that really quickly fizzled. So we focused more on deals and savings and really giving people what they wanted, which was the deals and offers, and then, which I can talk about later, expanding that beyond just travel into many use cases, fintech, cashback, etc. So to multiple use cases.
Has something changed in obviously the technology has changed, but has there been something that's changed in user behavior that would warrant some of these chatbot style businesses, or do you think that some of the problems that were there when you were starting are still prevalent today?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, unfortunately, I'm quite jaded by the consumer chat experience, and I think a lot of founders have reached out to me saying, "Hey, look, we're building a chatbot for this, chatbot for X, Y, Z," and they're going through the same most things that we've learned, which is the average customer actually doesn't really care about the medium, right? So people like you and I or VCs, we want to trade money for time. Like we want to spend money to save time. But for the average customer, they actually have too much time. They
Right.
want to spend time to save or make money, right? So it's kind of the opposite problem. And the average person also, they kind of enjoy that browsing experience,
Yes.
right? And that's something where I think people don't fully internalize is, yeah, like, you and I say, oh, it's kind of annoying. You open six different tabs and compare, look at reviews and like compare prices and whatever, right? Like it's kind of painful. But for the average customer, I actually think a lot of them actually enjoy that process, right? Because if you didn't, you just go to Marriott.com and you just buy it, right? It's not that hard. Like it's not that hard to go and say, hey, I want to buy something, or just even if you want to call a travel agent. So I think it's really the average customer. They enjoy that shopping and browsing experience. They enjoy looking at the images. They enjoy browsing back and forth. They enjoy like kind of looking at the reviews, whatever. So can there be a new sort of LLM AI powered chat experience? Yes. But is it going to be direct to consumer and your mass market consumer? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I think this is the bedrock of the behemoth companies like Google or Facebook. When you get a unification between Ivy League students and everyday people who work in the Midwest, when you see alignment between their customer behaviors and needs, that's when you can sort of build a behemoth. And I think that oftentimes people don't realize things that work maybe in the Bay Area with certain economics, certain lifestyle options may not work elsewhere. So I think that you bring up a very good point. So let's maybe get to the strategies for what's really surprising is how you start off as a 22-year-old and then you scale this thing up to 1 billion sales. So you champion in particular this sort of mission aligned teams framework. Can you sort of just break down for us what that framework means and share like a specific example of how that framework
Sure.
accelerated your growth?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. I mean, so I'll say one thing on the topic of growth is the power of compound interest is like the seventh wonder of the world, really, right? And I think when I started, when I was 22, I really never even thought about, getting to now we're over what 100 plus million revenue a year. And I was like, oh, if I could exit the company for 100 million, that'd be pretty cool, right? As like a 22-year-old. But then what happened was funny was no one wanted to buy us, and that's okay. And then we just kept growing, growing, and you look back, you're like, oh wow, the compounding power of growth is really, really significantly powerful. And that's kind of the whole thesis of Good to Great. If you read the book,
Yep.
it's like just the best companies just consistently execute and consistently grow. And over 10, 20 years, it becomes a behemoth because compound interest is so powerful. So that's the high level. Now, to talk about mission aligned teams, that was sort of a organizational structure change we made. Later on in the company, as we scaled probably over 50 to 75 employees, what used to work for us when you're 50 people or below 50 is you just, everyone gets in a room and you just get shit done, right? Like you're just, everyone knows each other, you're building stuff and you know what's important and you're focused and you're executing. But what happens is when you have hundreds of people,
Mm.
what should become obvious is no longer clear. Like I remember getting to a point where because we were functionally organized, right? Engineers report engineers, product people report product people, marketing people report marketing people. It became this sort of crazy dependency graph of like person A depends on B depends on C, but then person C didn't know who owned what, and then the priorities were not aligned.
Mm.
So two things happen. One is when we're doing OKR review or planning, it was like a multi-week process where we had to do this whole crazy topological sort of dependency graph just to plan because everyone was dependent on each other, but they weren't really fully, aligned with their roadmap and the overall roadmap. And two is whenever something broke, it wasn't clear who was doing what. Like this part of the product broke, who actually owned it, right? Like the engineers were doing engineering, the product were doing product, the growth were doing growth. Who actually owned this piece of the product? So what we did was we did a bunch of research. We talked to a lot of experts, our employees as well, and we wanted to model something off of the Amazon STO model. If you're ever familiar with that, it's the single threaded owner model from Amazon, where they have single threaded owners who own like a mini GM almost, who owns like a product line or a business unit, and they have everybody cross functionally report into that person, right? So the business person, the growth person, the data person, the engineers, they all report to the single threaded leader. And that was the model Amazon used, and it kind of really helped drive alignment, drive ownership, drive execution. But the challenge there for us and for most startups is that we don't have hundreds of people to throw at these STOs, right? Like each STO requires like a whole pod of engineers and a whole team, and your STO leader has to be super experienced. They have to be good at execution, good at strategy, good at managing people, managing engineers and business people and design, right? Like it's very hard and very expensive to hire these unicorns. So for us, we kind of did a hybrid. We called it mission line teams, which we wrote about. It's really getting the best of both worlds. So you have the alignment of STOs and clarity and focus, but without having to have thousands of people and sort of hundreds of engineers. So how it works is you still have you focus on certain missions in the company, right? A mission is kind of like a thread, but a mission is something that really you care about. It could be improve customer service, it could be improve the onboarding piece, or it could be um, uh, improve our payment flow processing, whatever mission you care about, and you staff a team that's self-sufficient to tackle that mission with a single leader. And the leader can be anybody. It could be an engineer, it could be a product person, it could be a business person, it could be a PM. And that person drives the execution of that mission line team, MAT, which we call it. And people work cross-functionally. So the MAT has all the resources it needs to control its own destiny. It has engineers, it has designers, it has business people, whatever you need. It can control its own destiny. So you don't have to do this crazy dependency graph. It can control its own destiny. But the mission line leader is not doing people management. So people still report functionally. So engineers still report to engineers, growth people go for the growth people. It's good for the employees because they get the career feedback and growth and coaching. And for the Matt lead, they don't have to be unicorn talent. They just need to be good at executing. They don't need to be super senior, crazy, GM level people who can manage, who can grow, who can do strategy. They just need to focus on getting the Matt to execute towards that mission. So we have Matt leads who are like new grads who've launched products from zero to 5-10 million in revenue within a year, right? So it really empowers people, gives them accountability, focus, and it sets a level playing field where anybody can be a Matt lead and drive impact.
Okay, so then what makes a mat lead? I mean, what are sort of the skill sets? You know, um, project management? Is it product management, engineering background? What sort of types of personas are filling that role?
Yeah, so it depends on the mission, right? So some missions are much more engineering heavy, like infrastructure, for example. In those cases, the mat lead obviously would and should be an engineer.
Hmm.
In some cases, the mission is more growth related oriented, right? So you want to grow this product line by 2x, and growth is the biggest lever. So a marketing person could be the mat lead. PMs naturally make pretty good mat leads because they're already kind of in that cross functional role, bridging business and engineering and product. They make good mat leads, but not everybody. So it depends on if the mission is product led, is it growth led, is it marketing led, is it engineering led. We try to have the right person, but the key is the person has to be driven, motivated, organized, and can really focus on execution. We also do like a foundational mat lead training boot camp where all mat leads go through foundational trainings like basic project management, basic execution, just to figure out how to execute and get stuff done. And then we make sure all the mat leads operate in a similar way, like through some sort of sprint, Kanban, Jira process, and then track the OKRs in the consistent way. So we have consistency across the board, and then you can swap mat leads in different places.
Is there a type of organization that shouldn't be doing this? I mean, maybe why does this work for you? What's what maybe inverse the idea. Maybe someone's listening to this and they're thinking it might be a good idea to implement, but it might not. But you might think it's sort of disastrous.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is if you're sub 50 people, you probably don't need it really because everyone's like knows each other, you're getting stuff done, the priorities. It's very collaborative and people know what needs to be done, and you can just tap on someone's shoulder and iterate quickly. So I think it's still quite a bit of overhead, right? Because we have mat level meetings, mat OKR reviews, and then mat training and mat foundations and all these things that still add overhead. So that's one way. When you're sub 50, you probably don't need this.
Mm.
And then another way, which may not be needed, is if you're like Amazon and you just have like hundreds of engineers, right? Then you should just do the Amazon model because ultimately to drive full accountability, reporting into one person is still very helpful because that's sort of just the hierarchy and the human psychology and dynamics that is still helpful. And so I think if you have enough people and you can afford or hire really senior STO leaders, the Amazon model is pretty tried and proven at scale. I think just for scale ups, it's a little hard. But if you're a big company and you want to staff fully, that can be very helpful. And lastly, the one downside is because you're empowering the mat leads a lot and you're empowering the ICs and it's sort of clear focus, you do lose a little bit of the leverage from some of your middle managers, which may not be a bad thing depending on sort of what your thoughts about our middle management are. But you do lose a little bit of leverage of your sort of directors and your sort of senior managers because now they're mostly managing their team, but indirectly, right? Like the team works in the mat, they don't work for the manager. So the ICs are working day in day out with the mat, and the manager is more of a coach sort of role. And sometimes the manager is very good, right? Like you need to be very good at your job to get to a director, but now you remove a little bit of the sort of impact of the director.
Okay. Yes. That makes sense. And so now we've got our growth engine going. We have a model that works maybe not for a startup, maybe not for a big company, but for a company in hyper growth,
Right.
and a sort of at scale, maybe we could say. Walk us through then. One of the key things that you've been able to do very well at Super is sort of moving from the single product focus to multiple offerings. And obviously, this is the biggest challenge for a number of technology companies. How did you go from sort of discount hotel deals to this sort of one unified app? And kind of, I know you have some sort of frameworks around this as well. If you could kind of talk through.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I wrote about this recently where every startup started off as a one trick pony, right? And that trick can actually get you pretty far. Amazon and books or Robinhood and free stock trading. So one trick can get you pretty far, but eventually over time you have to sort of evolve and grow the TAM, and you sort of just run out of customers in your initial product, and you got to grow. For us, it was a combination. So for us, it was a bit of travel is great, but it's not that like people. The average person doesn't travel that often. They travel once or twice a year, and it's okay. But it really wasn't sort of life changing for them, right? Like I save some money, that's great. They like it, but it's not life changing. And what we realized is a lot of our customers were people who are like lower income, lower credit. So we thought, how do we help our customers in more ways and help them expand the offering, increase the frequency and engagement, and really help them in more ways. So when you look at people who need to save money, there are a lot more ways we can help them save money, earn money, build credit than just travel. Right. So we spent about a year and a half building out a suite of products, launching our own card, having a bank partner, doing credit building, cashback rewards, earning money, and really rebranding to super.com. Now it's sort of an all-in-one app to help customers save and earn money. And the beauty of a super app is that, well, there's pros and cons. The beauty is that because you have multiple use cases, there are many ways to acquire and hook the customer. Right? You might come in for one use case, but we then cross-sell you and retain you for others and really sort of tie it all together under one sort of experience. That's great. You don't have to manage 6 different apps. You don't have to sort of promote different apps differently. You're gonna have one experience sort of that unifies everything and helps with the retention and engagement. Now the downside is because you're all in one app, it's very hard for people to fully understand what you do. Right? No one's saying, "Hey, I woke up tomorrow and I want an all-in-one app." Right? The customer has a problem to solve. They're not thinking about I want an all-in-one app to do XYZ. They're looking to solve the problem. So it's kind of tying in that initial problem and the hook and the sort of experience, and then also communicating, building a consistent messaging and brand around that. Those are some of the trade-offs. But overall, it's been great. So now, we're reallysuper.com, and over 80% of our transactions are non-travel. Right? So very well diversified, different use cases, and diversified revenue streams.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why companies typically take a long time to diversify their revenue streams is because of focus.
Right.
So, how did you figure out that it was the right time to sort of increase retention and maybe have multiple touch points with the customer, knowing that you'd lose some of that focus of just having one single feature?
Right. Yeah. For us, I think COVID was probably a big turning point because after when COVID hit, we lost about 80% of our revenue overnight.
Mm.
We actually ended up growing through COVID. We buckled up, our team together, rallied through it. We ended up going through it, but we kind of realized that there's just a lot more ways we could help our customers, and we had bigger, I think, ambitions and goals, and wanted to make a bigger impact. So that's how we decided to grow, sort of expand. COVID, I think, was a pretty big defining moment. We also raised a pretty large Series B that enabled us to do that, to hire and to invest in the people in the product. So those are, I think, some of the things. In terms of focus, I think the MAT structure really helped with that. It really outlined clear focus, clear accountability, and really empowered small, nimble teams to be able to innovate at scale. Right? It's not easy going from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, and then 0 to 1, and doing that multiple times. Right? And 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100 multiple times. So it's just having that clarity and organizational structure that allowed for nimbleness, innovation, accountability really helped. Like a lot of our new products were launched post Matt structure change, and that really accelerated our sort of growth and ability to innovate.
Okay, and then how does that work with your sort of use case frequency and frameworks and sort of growth loops? Maybe you can
Right.
touch upon your ideas there.
Sure, sure. So there's this big framework that I really like to use. Is from Reforge, and Brian Belfort wrote a great essay about it. It's kind of the four fits to growth to building $100+ million business. And really, it's about the product market model channel fit. We call it the PMMC fit.
Okay.
And really, it just means that the product has to fit the market, has to fit the model, has to fit the channel. Right? There's PMF, which we probably all know about, which is part of market fit, but that's not enough to get to a large scale, because you can have a great PMF, but if people can't find your product or you can't get it to market efficiently, then you can't get to that big scale. And that's why we look at the PMMC. Right. So every product we build and launch, we build with that lens in mind, which is this a great product for a market, and is there some channel which we can distribute, and is there enough people who are willing to pay enough money for this to be a big sort of revenue driver for the business. Right. So it's a great framework on that. I definitely highly recommend people read it. One of the key takeaways is that products are really built to fit channels, not the other way around. Right. So you can have a great product,
Hmm.
but Google is not going to bend over back to fit your product to their channel. Right. You have to really tweak a product such that it works on, say, SEO or SEM or something else, or YouTube, whatever it is. Like, they're not going to change their product for you. You have to make your product work for that channel. Same thing for sales, right? Like, if your product is a PLG or is it enterprise, and you have to build your product such that it works for that channel, and not the other way around.
And if you're doing, a bottoms up sort of sales motion, then maybe you want to have a SaaS offering that can be used just through a browser. If you're
Right.
if you're sort of top down executive focused sales motion, and you're really focused on sort of data privacy, then maybe the product
Right.
needs to be more on premise and
Exactly,
um,
exactly. Yeah, you have to tweak your product to fit that channel. So that's exactly. And then also growth loops is super important because it's all about compounding, right? I talked about compounding interest being like the seventh wonder of the world. The same with growth loops, right? There's some certain growth tactics that are linear and non-compounding, and some that are compounding, and that's what makes the world of difference, right? If you can, hire a salesperson for, say, I don't know, 100K, they sell 200K worth of contracts, right? That can be compounded because it's profitable. You take the money you made, you hire more salespeople, and then you can compound, right? But if you hire a salesperson that only sells 80K of contracts, right? Then it's not really like it's well. First of all, that's sublinear because you can't scale it. Even if it was you hire for 100K and you sell 100K, right? It's still harder to kind of really compound because it's your break even. So really, it's kind of this equation of, can you get a compounding growth? Same with like if you look at viral K factors, right? Is it above one or below one? So the moment you can get compounding growth, that's how you get that really explosive growth. But if it's linear, if it's one time like PR, right, you can get a spike in PR, but it's not sustained, and you're not compounding your growth.
okay, got it. Yes, so that makes sense. So those are some frameworks on, we've identified the problem, we've found our co-founder, we've scaled the company, but every sort of engine needs fuel. You guys went through a lot of tough sort of times and rejections in the early days, and so trying to find that first investor. How do you sort of think about, should we quit on entrepreneurship? Should we quit on this particular idea? Should we quit maybe on the market, how the product looks? Like, how do you sort of go through iterations when you're sort of raising capital, and you're sort of going through sort of rejection after rejection?
Yeah, I think founders should never quit because of investors, but they may quit because of the market or customers, right? But not because of investor. And not every good company, is necessarily a company investors like. So there's a sort of a separation there. Right? You can build a great company that investors hate, and you can make a lot of money, make a lot of impact, and investors still wouldn't touch it. Right? Does that make it
Mm.
a bad company? Not necessarily. It's just different profiles, and investors aren't perfect and they have their biases. So I'd say the most pulse is kind of the best pulse is your own energy and your own sort of motivation and drive. Right. As long as the way what Paul Graham says is, startups most often die by suicide, not by competition, right? So as long as you keep going and you have that drive and you're feeling excited and confident about it, um, you should just keep going. Maybe you're not getting good feedback and customers don't like it, and you're not, it's like pushing up against a boulder, right? Then maybe you should pivot, maybe you should do something else. But I think investors, it's just sort of a part of the process, but not necessarily the decision point for whether you do a startup or not.
Okay, got it. And then, so one last key question on sort of operations. So we talked about operations, finance. Then what about sort of profitability? So, a number of sort of high flying sort of data and infrastructure software companies, you continue to have sort of negative free cash flow, negative EBITDA margin, negative EBITDA. Like, how did you think about sort of achieving profitability versus public markets and sort of using public markets to sort of fund your growth? Like,
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. So I think a lot of this is market dependent, right? Like back then in 2020, it was all about grow at all costs, even if you lose money, and it's all about growth. And then after that was a correction. It's about being profitable and sustainable. And now I think it's reversing a little bit more, coming back to growth a little bit, or profitable growth. So I think it just depends on the markets a lot, and that's sort of what sets the tone and trickles down. It's the LPs talk to their investors talk to the founders talk to employees, and it kind of a whole trickle down effect. But I would say that I think ultimately you have to remember that valuation is based on the future, not the past, right? And you look at the future and how big this company is going to be and how much cash it's going to make in the future is ultimately what determines the value. And sometimes it's not necessarily tied to past, right? Like past performance can be a predictor of future, but not always. Right? That's why you see these companies losing all these money, but they still trade very favorably is because people, for whatever reason, rightly or wrongly, believe that they're going to make a lot of money in the future, right? And they could be right, they could be wrong. But I think that's why sometimes you have a disconnect between the current and the future, is because it's all about the belief of the future.
right. Um, so I think, thank you so much for sort of talking through that sort of profitability question. I think, coming to the end of this conversation, just wanted to get your thoughts on your role as an angel investor, as a startup advisor. What are you sort of most excited about for the next year? What gives you the most fear? And maybe let's start there.
Yeah. For me, I've been doing a lot to meet founders and help founders, and really as a founder first, right? I just love helping the community, giving back, paying it forward, and really just living curious a little bit through the journey. So it's always fun to meet great founders who have that drive, the hunger, the passion, the ambition, and build something. And I think I'm pretty fortunate to be able to see the 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100 plus, when I'm still fairly young and fairly sort of approachable. And I think I'm happy to share that experience with folks and my journey. So that's been great. In terms of what I fear, I think it's the way AI is moving. It's so fast and quick that it's hard to predict um, when the progress is going to stop, if ever. And the challenge there is not even that OpenAI or GPT-5 is going to kill your startup. It's more just that you could spend all this time right now today trying to make something work with this really sophisticated multi-agent reg data, pipeline flow, or maybe you wait till GPT-6 and they just do it for you, right? And that, even if it doesn't kill your company, all this work you just did is now kind of wasted. And in some sense, it's like, well, should you build now with the potential that this work is going to be wasted, or maybe you just wait and build next year with better tools, right? And it's not like back in the day when it was really hard to build mobile apps, right? And it took a while. It was still pretty hard for maybe 2-3 years before it became somewhat easy, and now it's like quite easy with React Native, right? It's not like that where the evolution took place in a matter of maybe half a decade or more. This is like taking place in a matter of like half a year, right? So what used to be hard, reg was all the hype last year, and now it's agents, right? Multi-agents, and next year, who knows? So with all these changes, like it's kind of like the evolution we saw before, but on steroids. So that's something I'm sort of just nervous about, or rather, just it's not clear when's. Sorry. The short answer is the best time to build is yesterday. But if you have the luxury of waiting, right, then it's not clear how sort of the intersection of the advancements and the tools and the frameworks versus creating where the value is accrued.
And I think I 100% agree. I mean, some of the work that I was doing, I think back to some of the work I was doing on sort of pre-training and fine-tuning models on sort of earlier generations of transform architectures. And even sort of before that, a lot of that, particularly, a lot of the work was being done on sort of vertical specific, like finance or healthcare, or, just thinking back to a lot of the concepts hadn't been learned yet. And so the baseline of performance wasn't there. And so if I just sort of waited until a lot of some of the GPT models had come out, I might have saved myself a number of hours. But I guess, you kind of just have to, another way to cut this is to just say, hey, we need a sort of intermediate solutions in the near term. And so that's why it's useful to sort of, pause and bridge us between the present and the future.
Right. Or just be okay with, having to rewrite your stack every 6 months, right? You look at, something like a Codium and a Windsurf, right? Like, I think that's a good example of that. And maybe Cursor will have to rewrite their stack too. And that's okay, so long as you can keep up being the leader.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much, Henry, for chatting and talking us through how you sort of scaled this business from, starting as a 22-year-old, engineering all these different frameworks, engineering sort of a mentality on how do you want to do product development. And so I hope you sort of enjoy the conversation as well, and really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, this was great. No, thanks for the great questions. Yeah, happy to help. So feel free to reach out. And thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.